Okay, well, welcome and to the wonderful world of butterflies and moths. My name is Julie Von Vett, and I just to give you a little background, I work with homeschoolers, and so in a 2-week period, I go out each day to a different church that has a homeschool co-op. So I go to 9 homeschool co-ops in a 2-week period, which has 10 days. So that's what I do. And so I see about 500 students in a 2-week period. And it's usually the elementary ages up to like 8th grade. That's what I address. And this year we are studying like flying creatures. And I've also published several books, devotionals. The next one coming up, Bruce Malone and I have written, and he will hopefully it will be coming. It's not sitting out on a ship waiting to be docked here, but we expect it in March, and that will be our next one called Without Excuse. And so Bruce will be bringing that in March. Anyway, we will get here to the world of butterflies and moths. Have you ever considered that the life cycle of a butterfly or moth actually refutes evolution? Do you know the difference between a chrysalis and a cocoon? And do you realize that a blue morpho butterfly is not blue? So where does it get its blue color then? And why are scientists studying moth eyes? What's going on there? So we will delve into now this wonderful world of butterflies and moths. To begin with, we have to say, what's the difference between a butterfly and a moth? What's the difference? Basically, generally speaking, butterflies fly during the day and moths fly at night. Butterflies have antennas that have knobs on the end of them. You see those white circles there? They have little knobs. What do they use these antennas for? For smelling. And so this is a butterfly here that have the knobs. A moth, like the Cecropia moth here, has feathery antenna. And look at the beauty of it right here. Yes, there are so many thousands of little receptors on this feathery looking antenna. In fact, the scientists have discovered that a moth can smell the female 7 miles away with its antenna. So you say, where are these butterfly and moth noses? Well, it's their antenna. Then butterflies, they have a slender body, while a moth has a fat, fuzzy body. Yeah, the moth right there is a Luna moth, and I will talk about that moth later on. We find this one in Minnesota. Now, what's this? Take a look at its body. Yep, fat and fuzzy. Now look at the antenna. Yep, it's a moth. It's a sphinx moth. Now, how do butterflies and moths rest? Well, look at the butterfly on the left. You can see that it rests with its wings closed, while the moth rests with its wings open. Do butterflies look the same on both sides? Not necessarily. You can see here's the eastern comma, and you wonder, why did it get its name that way? See that blue circle when its wings are closed? You see it looks like a comma? That's where it got its name. But it looks like a dead leaf when it's closed. It looks beautiful, multicolors when it's open. Here's the red admiral butterfly. You can see with the wings closed when it's at rest, and then you see when its wings are open. They don't necessarily look the same color. Now, are there more butterflies or moths? Well, when we look at these two categories, we see that 90% of the category has moths, or 150,000 moths in the world. Butterflies only make up 10%, or about 20,000 in the world. Well, why don't I see them? Because moths are out at night. That's why you don't see the great number of moths. And this is a skipper. What's a skipper? Well, you can recognize it when it flies. It skips like a stone when you fling it across the water when you're skipping. That's why it's called a skipper. Now, a skipper will have its antenna in a J-shaped. You see how look at the tip of the antenna. You can see it's J-shaped. It's not with a knob on it. It's not feathery. And you can see they will be smaller than a butterfly, But look at the body. The body is actually fatter compared to the wings when you compare it against a butterfly. So that's a skipper. But all of these go through complete metamorphosis. That is, they go through 4 stages, from egg to caterpillar to chrysalis to the butterfly. So here's how it begins. Here's the female. She's on her flight. She's smelling. Where is that milkweed? She finds the milkweed. She lands in the field. She then drums with her front feet, her 2 front feet. And in her 2 front feet are like 6 little knives that jab right into that milkweed plant. And then the plant stuff oozes out. And then the back 4 taste it. Yes, the back 4 legs taste it. And she says, is this a good place to lay my eggs? Is this a good place or not? If it's not a good place, she moves on to another plant. But if it's good, then she checks the plant for spiders, ants, and aphids. We want to protect those little babies. And so here she lays 1 egg on the underneath. And if you're out there looking, you can see right here, you pull a milkweed leaf, and you can see there's in that circle is that tiny little egg. She lays only 1 egg on 1 milkweed plant, and she'll lay 400 to 800 eggs in this manner. So we see right here, we see the egg, and you see that it will take, it says it will develop in 3 to 8 days. Because the insect is cold-blooded, it will take, if it's a warm day, it'll take 3 days. If it's a very cool day, it'll take 8 days. But look at that egg. The egg, you just look at it with your eyes and you say, there's nothing there. It looks just like a blob. But that's what scientists thought until they look under their electron microscope and they said, this is beautiful. It looks like a little miniature cathedral. Look at the symmetry. Looks like a little gem, a diamond. And they were so surprised because they believe in evolution and they didn't think that there would be so much detail in an egg. But of course, that's exactly what God would want. It would want something beautiful that it would surprise the scientists. And so we see here's the egg. And then after 3 to 8 days, it'll chew its way out. Notice how it doesn't have the typical stripes, and the monarch doesn't. It's first white, and then it goes around and it chews up its egg. You can see how tiny it looks, but it's white. It doesn't have the stripes yet. And this is what the caterpillar is. It's just an eating machine. And here it goes. It just eats and eats and eats and eats and eats and eats. That's all it does. 1 leaf in 20 minutes. It has to get fat. It just needs to keep eating. Now it will eat the milkweed. The milkweed is poisonous, but not to the monarch. This poison carries on into its adult life. And we can see right here in this picture, we can see that the blue jay is eating a monarch. Obviously, this blue jay is an inexperienced blue jay, because look at the next picture shows us vomiting up it. That's right. Don't mess with those monarchs. They're full of poisons from that milkweed plant. I'm sure that blue jay won't mess with it again. And here we see it's getting fatter and fatter. Now it will split its skin. And when it splits its skin, out will come the caterpillar with more elastic skin at that point. You can see there's the pile of skin right there. And how many molts or splitting of the skin does a butterfly go through? Well, it will go through 5. Each stage is called an instar. So you see the number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And it will split its skin on the 5th instar also. But it has to do that, for it has an exoskeleton. It's not like a beetle exoskeleton, but it still is limited in how much it can expand out. And then these caterpillars will have 12 simple eyes. Now, when you look at the caterpillar, you don't see the eyes. They're very small. So look over at where you see the green caterpillar head. Do you see those little purple squares on each side? There's like 6 purple squares on each side. That's what they look like, but they're very small. The bottom picture shows you where it's with the electron microscope. But these 12 simple eyes, you can't see them on the caterpillar. Don't even bother looking, but it's in the front someplace. They only see in black and white. That's all they see, black and white. So we have our monarch caterpillar. It eats milkweed, has a chewing mouth, crawls, has 6 legs with 10 prolegs. The prolegs are just for hanging on, not for walking, and 12 simple eyes, which only can see in black and white. And then on the 20th day, the caterpillar does something different. It starts to spin a little silken mat. Do you see that white little mat up there? That white little color thing? That's a little silken pad right there. And now it will hang itself upside down. It will be in this position for about 24 hours. And then when you start to see the antennas start to droop, in less than 30 minutes, you will see the splitting of the skin. Here you see the skin splitting, and the skin moves up to the top, and you have your chrysalis in 1 minute. Here's what goes on. Look at number 1. See number 1, where it's attached there to the silk pad? Okay, look over to the picture on the right side. See, it looks like a bunch of spaghetti, doesn't it? That's the silk pad looking under an electron microscope. Okay, go back to number 2. Now you can see he's starting to split his skin. Number 3, he splits his skin. Number 4, the skin is going on up. Number 5, okay, now he has to get rid of that skin hanging there. And because if that skin hangs on there, then that butterfly will be mutated. It will not form properly. So what happens is a little cremaster, a little black thing comes out from the caterpillar, reaches around that skin and attaches itself into that silk pad. On the right, you can see where it's blown up with all those little hooks on it. And now you see in picture number 6, when it's attached very firmly, now it goes into crazy gyrations to get rid of that skin. And then the skin drops off, and now it can just hang wonderfully. And you can see number 7, you can see that black little area in the silk pad, that's the cremaster. And number 8, it just settles down. It's soft at first, and then it will harden. So a chrysalis is just where it splits the skin, and it's just the hardened outer part of the caterpillar. Here's the 60-second transformation. All this takes place in 60 seconds, 1 minute. And this is a chrysalis. It's not a cocoon. So what's the difference between a chrysalis and a cocoon? Look at the chrysalis. Butterflies only have chrysalises. Chrysalises are the outer skin of the caterpillar that hardens. A moth makes a cocoon. That's a silky spun case. There's a great difference between the two of them. Now you might say, wait a minute, I thought butterflies have cocoons. That's because of this book. This book that we read to every preschooler drives me nuts. It says, The Very Hungry Caterpillar. And look at the picture of the cocoon. It says, he built a small house called a cocoon around himself. He stayed inside for more than 2 weeks. Then he nibbled a hole in the cocoon, pushed his way out, and he's a butterfly. No, this is wrong. Butterflies have chrysalises. They do not have cocoons. Only moths have cocoons. So what's happening inside of the chrysalis? Everything starts to dissolve away. It becomes caterpillar soup. The digestive system dissolves away. The legs where they're attached dissolve away. Everything dissolves away. It becomes only a green kind of jello. All that's left is a little red beating heart. And that's it. And then inside, it will start rearranging itself. Notice how well it blends in to this milkweed leaf. And it takes 1 to 2 weeks as a chrysalis. Again, it depends on the temperature. If it's very warm, it'll take 1 week to become a butterfly. If it's cooler, it takes 2 weeks, all depending on the temperature. And here's the 12-hour transformation. And then it starts to want to push itself out on the lines of weakness. And when we look at it, here's that crumpled butterfly. Look at those wings. They're wet. Look at how tiny those wings are compared to the body. Look how everything was stuffed inside that chrysalis. Look how fat that abdomen is. So we see right here that the abdomen is, it has full of fluid, and then it will pump it into the wings. And the wings will get a lot larger. It takes about 15 minutes to do this. And now it's time to dry. And as they time to dry, you can see how big the wings are compared to what was inside the chrysalis. And here's that a picture of what all goes on in the steps of it. Look how tiny it was. How would you stuff a butterfly into such a small area? You know, only our God can think of how to build it and then to make sure it unfolds. What do monarch butterflies eat? Look at there's the proboscis, that straw that sucks up that nectar. Now it has compound eyes, 2 eyes that have 6,000 lenses, and now can see in colors and in ultraviolet range. Butterflies need to drink nectar, therefore, it needs to see where to get the nectar. Look at the purple flower. That's what we see. See the white flower with the little red area? There's the bullseye. Head for that nectar. It's like making that nectar revealing itself very clearly. So here's what we see, a yellow flower. What does a butterfly see? It sees that red area. There's where the nectar is, and there's the white. We see a purple flower. They see the red center there. That's where they head to get that nectar. So we have our caterpillar. It has 12 eyes, seeing in black and white, and it changes to have 2 eyes with 6 lenses, seeing in color and UV. It has a chewing mouth that eats salad. It changes to a sucking mouth that sucks nectar. It eats only milkweed, and now it sips nectar and water. It has 6 legs and 10 prolegs, and now it just still has 6 legs because it's an insect. Has no wings as a caterpillar to 4 wings as a butterfly. As a caterpillar, it crawls. As a butterfly, it flies. This whole transformation happens inside the chrysalis, and this is where the metamorphosis change takes place. And what do evolutionists say about this metamorphosis? They say there's no evidence how such a remarkable plan of life ever came about. They can't explain it. How does a caterpillar turn into a butterfly? How does that happen? They don't know. They don't know how to explain how a caterpillar can totally dissolve itself and reform itself into a butterfly. Then you have to ask yourself, which one has the babies? Does the caterpillar have babies, or does the butterfly? The butterfly has the babies. So in other words, no evolution here. It has to go through all 4 stages. It has to go through this metamorphosis in order to have the babies. So if it took, by evolutionary view, millions of years to be a caterpillar into a chrysalis, guess what? No babies, no more of those caterpillars. When we look at this 4 stages that they go through, this metamorphosis, we realize it just shows that there is a God. There's no other way of explaining this transformation. And then when you realize that there are 20,000 other butterflies in the world proclaiming this metamorphosis, proclaiming the creator by going through these 4 stages. How can evolution explain this? They can't. Only our God could think of something like this. God has purposely made it impossible to explain creation without him. How do you tell a male monarch from a female? Well, they both basically look about the same, but look down on the bottom one, the male. See those where I circled? There's his pockets. This is where he puts his cell phone to call home and tell his wife that he'll be late. That's how you can remember the male from the female. Now, where did the monarchs go in the fall? That's what this professor in Canada was wondering back in the 1970s. And so he started tagging. This is an up-to-date tagging, but his tags weren't like that. But he was tagging. He was trying to figure out where they were going. Well, where did they go? They found out they went 2,500 miles from Minnesota down into Mexico. It took about 8 to 10 weeks. And how do they know where to go? Well, the way they know where to go is by using the sun, but they have a clock in their head. For example, if the monarch's internal clock said 10 a.m., then the monarch knew, oh, I'll fly west of the sun to maintain a southerly flight direction. But it had to have a clock in its head in order to do this. If it was 12 noon, okay, then the monarch would fly toward the sun. And if it's 2 p.m. in the afternoon, the monarch flies to the east of the sun. To have a sun compass, you have to have a clock. And to have a clock means there had to be a clock maker, and that clock maker put that within the monarch. That clock maker is God. Now here, what they did this experiment with the Earth's magnetic field. They know there's a magnetic field, it's invisible, and they were wondering if the monarchs were affected by this magnetic field. So they put, they made this room, and they just brought in a box of monarchs and they let them go, and they maintained that what the magnetic field is on Earth. And sure enough, the monarchs flew southwest. So then they took the room and they messed up the magnetic field so there wasn't a magnetic field. And then they opened their box of monarchs, and the monarchs just flew every which way. Okay. Then they decided, let's reverse the magnetic field. So it's the opposite of what it really is. And then they went and released the monarchs, and the monarchs then flew northeast. Yes, they thought it was southwest, but they ended up flying northeast. Then they realized, yes, the magnetic field did affect their flight. So they said, what's going on? What's with these monarchs? So they started dissecting them and looking at their bodies, and they found little bits of magnetite within the bodies. Magnetite is what we make our compasses out of. And that's what the ancient sailors would use. They called them a lodestone at that point, but it's really the mineral called magnetite. And that's what they would make their compasses out of. And they could know the direction of north and south, east and west. I'm sorry, north and south, not east and west, but north and south. And that's what the butterflies have in their bodies, little tiny compasses. And here's the fall migration where they're taking off. And this is where they were headed, down west of Mexico City. They would follow along the coastline. And then as they're heading to this west of Mexico City, that area has lots of minerals. So it's kind of like a little anomaly that now the monarchs would fly there because of that magnetic pull. And they would go to these 12 isolated mountaintops. And there they would roost for the winter. And the professor up in Canada, he didn't know where they were. And so I wrote an ad in the newspaper down in Mexico City and said, hey, does anybody know where these butterflies are going? Have you seen them? And a couple down there, they realized, yeah, we've seen this. And you know what? Let's just drive around on our motorcycles on weekends and see what we can find. So they spent a couple years doing it, and then they found it. Yes, just west of Mexico City, 1975. And they found these butterflies. And you can see there's the wife with all those butterflies. And they were truly amazed that the butterflies could make it there. And they just roosted. So the professor from Canada came on down. He looked at these roosting butterflies, and there was like some 300 million of them. He was astounded, but this is where they roosted. And then in March, when the daylight starts getting longer, now they're off. They mate, they leave, and they make the first journey up to the southern part of the United States. So happens that the milkweed is now ready for them. So when the female monarchs come, they lay their eggs across the southern United States in like March. Then those little ones grow up. Well, I should say first the monarch, then she fades away. There she's laying the egg, and she dies. So we see right here that these butterflies then will live for 7 months. They lay their eggs. It takes about 1 month for their children to develop. You see the egg, the caterpillar, the chrysalis, and then it's a butterfly. This is like a month for it to develop. Now these make the next part of the journey. And then in the southern part of the United States, they lay their eggs and then they die. And then the children make it on, go up the next part. And then when they get to Minnesota, they lay the eggs. They live for only about 1 month. And the female, again, she lays several hundred eggs and then she dies, each part of the journey. Then you have in July, you'll have the great grandchildren. They die, and the great grandchildren are born. That's in July. The great grandchildren are born in August and September. These are the ones that will return down to Mexico. The great grandchildren will return to Mexico. They will live down there from August to November. They will spend the winter in Mexico, and then they will make their journey back up. In other words, the monarchs that we see in Minnesota has taken 5 generations and 5,000 miles round trip to do this migration. 5 generations. No one's showing them the way. They just know where they're going. Evolution says this all happened by chance. How could it? There are too many steps for this to happen. No, God sets this up from the beginning to show his great power. Information is bound in the genetic coding of each butterfly such that it knows at what stage of the migrating cycle the group of butterflies is in. This information is passed on to each generation. Such a delicate mechanism shouts intelligent design. We see that even in Jeremiah, God speaks of migration. Even the stork in the sky knows her appointed season. The dove, the swift, and the thrush observe the time of their migration. Do all monarchs from North America go to Mexico? Nope. The ones that are west of the Rockies go to California for the winter. Now, people were beginning to wonder, were there other butterflies that migrated? Then they noticed there's the painted lady butterfly. It does a migration. It's up in the Arctic Circle, travels to Europe, down to Africa, and back around again. 9,000-mile round trip with 6 generations. So you say, why didn't they notice it before? Because they fly at altitudes of 3,000 feet and no one saw them. They thought, somebody was saying, what is that up there? So they sent up nets up there to catch them and bring them back down to identify what butterfly or what creature it was that was flying. And so this is how they started using radar to track them. And they started realizing this painted lady butterfly did a annual migration. And it was 9,000 miles round trip, 6 generations. Now I'm going to look at some other butterflies. Here's the eastern tiger swallowtail. And it has 3 disguises, so it won't be eaten. Here it is. It's a little caterpillar. It just hatched. Look, it looks like some bird droppings. That's right. This is the first disguise. Birds love to eat caterpillars, but what bird will eat another bird's poop? It will not. Good disguise. After some moltings, here's the second disguise. It looks like a snake. That's right. A snake, well, birds don't like snakes. They're afraid of snakes. But look, there's just some drawings. It's not a snake. It's just its disguise. And here's the third disguise. When it's in its chrysalis, it looks like a withered leaf or a twig. Nothing will bother it. So here's how you have to ask. How does a caterpillar know what bird droppings look like? And then copy it. How does a caterpillar know what a snake looks like? Then try to copy it. And how does a caterpillar know what a dead leaf looks like? And then try to copy it. Caterpillars and butterflies don't know these things, but the God of the universe does. And he designed it this way so these little this little butterfly can survive and thrive and not be eaten by birds. So it can develop into a beautiful butterfly for us to observe. Here's another swallowtail, a black swallowtail. Look at the one on the left. Yep, I've picked those up. And one time when I picked one up, look at the one on the right with the yellow little forked, you could say tongue, but it's not a tongue. It's just a forked yellow object that comes out of its head, not out of its mouth. It's called an osmeterium. Yes, it flicks that in and out and gives off a foul smell, enough to make you drop it. And sure, that's what scares those birds. If they want to mess with it, that's what it flicks out at it. And only swallowtails have these osmeterium. Here's the spice bush swallowtail. And you can see its area where it lives. It's not Minnesota, but it's still a fascinating type butterfly because of its disguises. Again, the spice bush swallowtail, its first disguise, is a caterpillar, but it looks like bird poop. Again, what bird would eat its own poop? It would not. But look at here. If bothered by a bird, it sends out that osmeterium. It looks like a forked tongue. It certainly looks like a snake because those other things are those eye spots, which look like snake eyes. Birds hate snakes. Now the little caterpillar is protected. And here's the spice bush swallowtail's second disguise. I think it kind of looks more elaborate for this it looks like a snake. Again, birds are afraid of snakes. And here's its third disguise. Yep. A crazy looking snake again, it looks like, but it's not. It's just a caterpillar. And of course, here's the withered leaf look. That's the fourth disguise as it's developing inside that chrysalis to become a spice bush swallowtail. Again, you have to ask an evolutionist, how does a caterpillar know what bird droppings look like? Did they look it up in the dictionary or the encyclopedia or whatever it is? No, it did not. It doesn't know these things. It's a caterpillar. Then even if it knows it, then how about trying to copy it? How do you change your DNA? Just because I don't like my blue eyes, I want brown eyes, I can't change them. Neither can a caterpillar. And look at the caterpillar when it looks like a snake. How does a caterpillar know what a snake looks like and then try to copy it? Or how does a caterpillar know what a dead leaf looks like and then try to copy it? No, all of these disguises had to be made by a disguise maker. And that disguise maker for these butterflies was God. Now, when we look at moths, there are about 150,000 moths in the world. And all moths go through this complete metamorphosis: egg, caterpillar, cocoon, adult. And so here's the Cecropia moth. Here are the eggs. Here's the caterpillar. And you know, that caterpillar, when I was feeding these, I thought they'd be like smaller, but they're huge. Look at how big they are compared to the person's finger. Yes, they were as thick as your thumb and huge. It was kind of, the first time I saw that was kind of frightening, but you just let them grow. So there's the caterpillar. Now it spins a cocoon. You can see the one with snow on top. Yep, that's how they survive the winter. And then in the spring, they come out as this beautiful Cecropia moth. Inside the cocoon is the pupa. Inside there is that caterpillar soup. It dissolves everything about itself of being a caterpillar and then changes all into the moth. That's right. There's the caterpillar soup. It goes through metamorphosis to this beautiful Cecropia moth. You can find these in Minnesota. They're about as big as your hand. Here's the milkweed tusset caterpillar. You thought milkweed was just for the monarch. Nope, there's a moth. And you see the egg, the caterpillar. I think the caterpillar looks like a little poodle. It's kind of cute. And then there's the cocoon. And then out will come the moth. Sometimes the cocoons are hidden in leaves. Now here's the woolly bear caterpillar. And you can see, do you know that the woolly bear caterpillar turns into a moth? Yeah. So just before winter, you can see the little woolly bear caterpillar. The caterpillar stays that way all winter long. And then in the spring, it will come out. It will make a cocoon and it'll stay in the cocoon for 1 to 2 weeks. and then out will come an Isabella tiger moth. Hey, why couldn't they have called it a woolly bear moth? I don't know why they call it an Isabella tiger moth. Do woolly bear caterpillars tell what kind of winter it will be? No, that's just folklore. But here's what it is. If it's going to be, if you find a caterpillar, a woolly bear caterpillar with lots of cinnamon color in the middle, it's going to be mild. If you find hardly any cinnamon in the middle, it's going to be a terrible winter. It's just made up. There's nothing to do with it. It's just fun. Do you ever wear cocoons? Think about it. Yes, you do. Yep. Silk is made from cocoons. And to tell you, silk is actually made from caterpillar spit that hardens. Yes. Don't you love my lovely silk scarf? Yes, it's hardened caterpillar spit. It's so wonderful that I have it wrapped around my neck. That's what we do with our silk. Here's the backstory of how it was discovered. About 2600 BC, the Empress of China was having a cup of tea out in her garden, and into her teacup plopped a cocoon. And she looked into her teacup and saw that cocoon unraveling. What could I do with this kind of thread? Because it looked like thread. And a whole industry of silk got started. But they never let anybody know of where that silk came from. It was a secret. If anybody found out in the inner circle where the silk came from, a cocoon, they would cut their heads off. That's right. They wanted to keep it a secret. And here we see, here's the Silk Road. It went for 1,500 years, where people from Europe would travel along the Silk Road to China and then back. Now, some monks wanted to find out the secret. And so they brought along the hollowed out walking stick. They said, let's find out where this silk comes from. And they found out, and they stuffed all the eggs, the silkworm, the food, all that stuff in their stick and hiked it out of China to try to get the industry started in Europe. So here's where the silkworms start. There are the eggs. Eggs hatch. Here are the silkworms. They're not worms, they're caterpillars, but they call them silkworms. And they feed them mulberry leaves. Hence, you know the song. Here we go around the mulberry bush, mulberry bush, mulberry bush. Yep, that's where it comes from. And then the silkworm, it will molt 4 times. Inside, you can see there's the inside the pupa. You will see there's the transformation that's going to be taking place. Now, when the caterpillar stops eating, it will put it in one of these little squares, and then it will start spinning a cocoon. It takes about 2 days. Once the cocoon is finished being spun, then they will plunge all these into boiling water to kill the pupa inside. The reason they kill it is, look at the picture down below. See the moth coming out of it? To come out of the cocoon, the moth would chew through it and break the thread. So here the cocoon's ready to unravel. And here the thread, one cocoon will make a thread a half a mile long. So they put it in not boiling water, but just tepid water. And they put about 10 of them together. And so they have a thicker silk thread. And here they are unraveling it. And you can see 100 cocoons make a tie. So are you wearing caterpillar spit? You are when you wear silk. What's one of the largest moths? The Atlas moth right here is about 10 inches across. You find it over in Southeast Asia. It's a moth. And remember, what do moths do when they're resting during the day? They rest with their wings open. What a target for birds to go for. It's so huge. But look what's on the wings. Do you see this? On the wings, it looks like a snake head. That's right. It's like 2 cobra heads painted on. In Cantonese, they call this the snakehead moth. That's right. And you say to yourself, how does a cobra know? I mean, how does a Atlas moth know this? I mean, what is the enemy of my enemy? How would a cobra know a bird's enemy is a cobra? How would how would the moth know that the enemy of the bird is the cobra? How would they know that? Did they look it up in a dictionary? In other words, when we see this kind of pattern on their wings, we know there has to be a pattern maker, a painting. Who is the one who created this painting to frighten away the birds so they wouldn't be eaten? That's our God. There we go. We can see it right here. Here's that pattern, and that means there had to be a pattern maker. Would this scare you? Looks like a horrible animal. Actually, it's the emperor speckled moth. Look at the sparkle even in that moth's eye spots. That's right. That would frighten any animal away, thinking they're looking at another animal. We kind of have it in Minnesota. This is the Io moth, and when it reveals its lower wings, you can see there's the eye spots, even with the sparkle, frightening it away. Here's the Polyphemus moth. It has its eye spots. You say, why is it called the Polyphemus moth? Because it's named after the Cyclops. It's named Polyphemus. We have this one in Minnesota. You know, when you see these eye spots, you know, it's not just haphazard. Evolution would say, oh, it came this way over millions of years. And you say, really? Evolution wouldn't, this moth would know what an eye spot looked like, what an eye of an animal, even with a little sparkle in it, would know what it looks like? No. How about the God of the universe saying, I'm going to protect these moths and I'm going to give them the ability to do it, looking like eyes staring back at them, whoever bothers these moths. Here's the owl butterfly. It lives in Central and South America. It feeds on like bananas and other fruit. So we see this owl butterfly with its eye spots, and when it's revealed, it looks like an owl. What do owls like to eat? Birds. So if the bird is bothering this butterfly, is he going to be surprised by this, what looks like an owl? You bet it will. And this is how it's protected. Here's the rosy maple moth. It looks very much like the seeds that you find on a maple. And so this is how it's protected with its camouflage. Hey, is this a dead leaf or a butterfly? What do you think? When we look at it, we see that it looks like a leaf. It has a midrib. It has the veining, and then it has like lichen or like fungus on it. What is it? Is it a dead leaf or a butterfly? Well, it's called the dead leaf butterfly. When the butterfly's wings are closed, it looks like a dead leaf. When it's open, you see the beautiful oranges and blues and blacks. And so as this butterfly is flying through the jungle, a bird is after it. It drops to the forest floor, and it looks just like a dead leaf, confounding the bird. It can't be eaten. How would this come about? How would you explain this dead leaf butterfly with a leaf? Does a butterfly know what a leaf looks like and try to change its DNA to get to that point? No. When you see these type of designs, you know there must be a designer who designed this leaf this way, designed this butterfly this way. And who is that designer? God himself. What letter is this? F. What letter is this? T. What letter is this? R. Yep, that's what this gentleman who was looking at butterflies and moths, he said, I wonder if I can find the entire alphabet, and so I can write my name in moth and butterfly. I wonder if I can do that. And sure enough, he found it. There's all the ABCs, and then he found his age also. He could write his age in butterfly and moth. Will touching the wings hurt the butterfly? No, it has millions of scales. Yep, those are just little scales. This is magnified right here. What makes the colors on a butterfly or moth? Well, if it's the earth tones, like the brown, orange, yellow, white, and black, that's like your color crayon. Yep, that's the color of it. But what about a blue morpho? It's not blue. No, it's not. It doesn't have a blue colorings. In fact, many of the green, copper, silver, and gold, that's not the color that butterfly is. These colors are made by the structure of it. It's a structural color. Here's what scientists did. They took and looked at the wing, and you can see there's a scale. Then they took one scale, then the third one in. They said, let's look at a ridge. It looks like ridges here. Let's turn the ridges on the sides, see what they look like. And when they did that, they realized that they looked like Christmas trees. That's right, Christmas trees. And so when the sunlight hit these Christmas trees, the only light that came out was the blue wavelength, and we see the blue color. This is how the structural color is made. Here are the ridges. The light hits in, bounces off those Christmas tree branches, and makes the blue color. Here we see. Here's the Christmas tree. Notice that where it hits the branches and then bounces out. And because of each branch is precisely the distance it should be and the length it should be, it produces the same blue wavelength. When you produce the same blue wavelength again and again and again, it causes the amplification and the shimmering of this blue. You see the first part where it says constructive, that's in phase wavelength, and that amplifies the blue color. If it's not in the phase, if it's out of phase, it can actually cause cancellation, or it can cause other mixtures of colors. But here we see the blue. When light hits the different layers of a butterfly wing, it is reflected numerous times. The combination of all these reflections causes the intense colors. And that's where we get the beautiful blue morpho is not blue. It's a structural blue, but it's not like a blue coloring crayon. Pigmented. And see, when it closes its wings, you see how it looks like just brown. That's all it is. You can see the blue coming through because, well, the wings have been kind of, they're deteriorating a bit. So that's why you can see it coming through. They're getting raggedy. But these butterflies will fly in the jungle, and the birds will see that intense blue, and they'll follow after them, drop to the jungle floor. Hey, where'd they go? All I find is this dead looking leaf down there. That's how they escape. And here's a vintage blue morpho plate made out of butterfly wings. And when you put a flashlight on it, you can see the intensity of the blue. But when you hold it off to the side, it looks brown. So you can get a chance to see the structural colors being displayed. Here's the green swallowtail butterfly. Where does that green come from? It's the structural color. You see, here's what one of them looks like. You see how they're kind of stacked on top of each other with that green part right there. Each scale is stacked on top of each other, but it also has, look at the bottom picture, it has the indentation. It looks like a bowl. That's right. So when the light hits it, the center of that bowl has yellow wavelength, and the sides of the bowl have a blue wavelength. Yellow plus blue equals green. And that's where you get the beautiful emerald green swallowtail butterfly. And again, when its wings are closed, you see something different. Can butterflies overheat? Yes, they can. Yet they have a network of mechanical and temperature sensors so they can cool down. Here's an infrared photo showing the cooling as they try to cool down. They'll try to move out of the sun and other ways to get away from the heat, because these are living cells. Looking at the nanostructure of the wings, we see that the heat will radiate off, trying to cool the wings. Why doesn't the rain destroy the wings? Oh, those raindrops, they can be terrible. It would be the equivalent of a 22-pound bowling ball hitting us. So how come the wings aren't being destroyed? That's because when they looked under the electron microscope, they found tiny little bumps and wax. The tiny little bumps, tiny little bumps when the raindrops hit would shatter the raindrop and cause it to just spread out. And then the wax on the wings, on the scales, would allow it just to skid right on off like when we have wax in our cars. When the rain hits it, it just moves right on off. Do we say our wax happened by accident chance for our car? No, an engineer had to make that wax. Here's the Luna moth. It's about the size of your iPhone. It's here in Minnesota. Now look at the tails. Look at how they're kind of like, twisted and roughly and not flat at all. This is a good thing because what likes to eat the Luna moth? Bats. Bats will send out their sonar and the sonar will bounce off of it and will come, and then the bat knows where it's located and then he can go eat it. However, the Luna moth has this frilly little tail here. And when the sonar hits that tail, and as it's flying, it's fluttering and moving and spinning and all this kind of thing. It's not flat, it's spinning around. So the sonar that's deflected off of it is then bounced around. Bats have a difficult time eating the Luna moth. When you look at the Luna moth, how would you explain how they have those frilly elongated tails like that on their wings? How would you explain that? Does a Luna moth know that bats use sonar and that it needed to develop a sonar confusing mechanism? Of course not. Did the God of the universe know that this Luna moth had to have a chance against the bats? You bet. And so he gave it that elongated, frilly, moving tail. Now we get to our moth eyes. Whenever you're driving down a road, do you see the moths looking at you? I mean, we see deer, we can see the lights reflecting back, but we don't see the moths looking at us. No, we don't. So what's going on? Scientists were curious. They said, let's take a look at those moth eyes. And they said, you know what? They're anti-reflective. They don't reflect back out. How come? So again, they looked at under the electron microscope, and what did they find? They found these little nano bumps, these little tiny bumps, and how they're just distributed, these little tiny structures. And they realized the wavelengths of light are not reflected, but are deflected and absorbed. When the light goes in, it bounces around, never goes out. And they're going, hey, these little nanostructures probably would be great if we put them on our screens. Yeah, that would solve the glare problem. So in the future, be ready for those moth eyes to be on your screens to solve the glare problem. Now we all know about solar panels. Yep, they're making them a lot today, and they're very thick and they have to be pointed toward the sun. There's some difficulties with it. They can't capture that sunlight very well. And that's what one of the scientists was wondering about the common rose butterfly from India. Sure, it was black, but did it have other ways of absorbing sunlight to be warm? Because remember, it's a cold-blooded insect. What they found was that there were little holes all over the butterfly's wings. And these holes were random sizes and random positions. So instead of making some uniform photovoltaic structure, they said, let's copy this butterfly and make a thin little film, nano holes with nano diameters and nano and different positions. And this would they found that it actually would capture more sunlight better than if it was uniform and all across the board, like in the display of it and in the width of it. So they found this was great. So look forward to having more of these butterflies on your photovoltaics. Now, this is what one of the professors said. The real interesting thing is that the butterflies, which have evolved these complex structures as a result of selection over millions of years, are still way outperforming our engineering. Of course, he gives homage to evolution, but really, it's the God who made this. But notice what he's saying. These butterflies are still way outperforming our engineering. In other words, he is recognizing that there's engineering going on. And with the engineering, there has to be an engineer. And who is that great engineer? God himself. Making solar panels does not happen by accident chance. Making solar panels for a butterfly does not happen by accident chance. There had to be a maker in both. And the one that is the best is the one that the butterfly has. And that's what people are copying, that wonderful engineer. Now here's a vehicle that's been hit by IED. And if people were in it, obviously they would have received maybe some brain damage. Who knows? Maybe it would be later on. That's the problem with this later impact of the IEDs. So they've looked to butterflies to help with this blast-induced traumatic brain injuries. Notice down on the bottom, you see the butterfly badges. Yes, all these millions of little scales, when there's a great blast, they actually twist and turn. And so if they put these butterfly badges, like say on the helmet, on the uniform, then they can actually see what has happened with the blast. When the blast hits, how many of those little scales were flipped and turned? Then they know if they really need to pay attention to this soldier or not. You see, sometimes these brain injuries are not revealed until years later. But so that's what they're trying now with these butterfly badges. This whole area that I've talked about with the solar panels, moth eyes, butterfly badges is called biomimicry, where we actually copy what God has already made. And of course, Job 12:7 says, but ask now the beast, and they will teach thee. And of course, we get to the peppered moths. Yep, they're the icon of evolution. You know the story. Before the Industrial Revolution, there was a lot of the white-colored pepper moths on the trees. Then the Industrial Revolution came, and then we have the darker ones, and then they would be easier to pick off by the birds. You can see right here, you can see the white ones would blend in, but when you had the dark trees, then the birds would come and pick it off very easily. That's what the story was, that they didn't blend in anymore. But the problem here is these moths don't rest on the trunks. They actually rest in the canopy. Number two, to show this, they put dead moths, they pinned them on the tree or glued them on the tree. So we get the idea like you see in this picture. And really, note, only the color changed. They are still moths. They're still moths. It's not this, there's no evolution going on here. And that's what they want us to think, that these pepper moths are evidence of evolution. What we see is like maybe the lizards on the bottom, microevolution. You have different colored lizards, different sizes. You don't see macroevolution where the lizard changes into a roadrunner. Peppered moths are peppered moths. They haven't changed into any other creature. No evolution here, just variety. And have they found fossils of butterflies? Yes, they have. They found them in amber. So butterflies have not changed from the past. They're still butterflies. And here's some found in shale. Why is the yucca moth proof of God creating and not evolution? You see, the yucca flower can only be pollinated by the yucca moth, and the yucca moth can only lay their eggs in yucca flowers. Here's what goes on. I should mention that this has been studied since the Civil War. These two in relationship have been studied since the 1860s. So here's the yucca flower. And over on the other side, you see there's the yucca moth. Here she is. Let's look at the yucca moth. She goes up to where the pollen is, scrapes the pollen off. And you notice down on the bottom picture, she has these two tentacles that are very different than anything that you find on any other moth. But anyway, those tentacles help in scraping that off. And then she rolls that pollen into a ball, puts it under her neck, and flies away to the yucca flower. Then go to the base of the flower where you see the seeds to be. You see where that blue part is? And then you see where those seeds to be are there? Okay, she makes a hole into that area, lays her eggs in there. Then she goes to the very top of that blue part right there. That's called the stigma. And then she pushes that pollen into that little dip in that stigma. And that pollinates the flower. And now the seeds to be start growing. And those caterpillars only eat half of the seeds. So therefore, there can be more yucca plants. And then they get their fill. And then when they grow then they drop to the ground, burrow into the soil, and then they are down there for a year, and then they come out as a moth, and the whole thing is repeated again and again. There is no other plant that can be, no way of this yucca plant being pollinated other than the yucca moth. And there's no other place for that yucca moth where it's going to lay its babies, its eggs. And so when you look at the yucca, you say, there it is. These two working together from the very beginning. This is showing that there is a God. How else would you explain it? Here's the morning cloak butterfly. I saw this last winter, like in February. It was a warm day, and I was taking a walk, and sure enough, here was this butterfly. A butterfly in the middle of winter? What's going on? How do insects survive the winter? Remember, they're cold-blooded. If they're cold-blooded, they take on the temperature around them. So why aren't they frozen solid? They should be frozen solid. When we realize how things freeze, like if you put a pop can into a freezer, it will get 9% bigger and break it open. You see a gallon of water, when it's frozen, gets 9% bigger, and it can break pipes, iron pipes. So getting water in any of us could actually cause us to have our cells become damaged. But what do we have for our cars? We have a thing called antifreeze for our cars, so the pipes don't break there, so the radiator doesn't break. That's what insects have. They make their own antifreeze. When it starts getting cool in the fall, each cell starts producing this glycerol, and that's a type of antifreeze, so they can survive the winter, even as a cocoon. Because you see on the right, you can see there's the cocoon. So some survive as eggs, some survive as a caterpillar, some survive as a cocoon. And in the case of butterflies, these are the butterflies you can see in Minnesota on a winter day. Now you may wonder why that one is called a question mark. There's the question mark. Look, when its wings are closed, you see the blue little circle there? That's their question mark. So here's the morning cloak. This is what it looks like when its wings are closed. And where do these butterflies hide out? Oh, in log piles, behind bark, all that kind of thing. So if you're taking a walk during the wintertime, just know that there are butterflies that are just waiting to come out on a warm day in the winter. Did you know there's a caterpillar that lives for years? Yes, it's the woolly bear caterpillar up in the Arctic. It can survive 90 below, and it takes 14 years to mature. So up in the Arctic, in the summertime, it will come out, it will eat and eat, but if it's not mature enough, it has to then go another winter where it's hibernating and where it makes that glycerol, that antifreeze, so it won't be destroyed. It does that for 13 summers, and then the 14th year, it will make the cocoon, and out will come the Isabella tiger moth. Again, are they able to survive? They survive because they have antifreeze. And who's that antifreeze maker? God himself. Now here's Dr. Bernard de Abreu. He has written the Concise Atlas of Butterflies of the World. He knows butterflies, and his 350-page book has lots of examples. He's like, people know he knows butterflies. He's been studying them his own life. But what's interesting about this book is about 50 pages of it denounce evolution. Here's what he said. He describes evolutionary theory as viscid, asphyxiating baggage that requires blind religious faith. He says that evolution is not based on demonstrated truths or experimentally proven hypotheses. This book, he says, is a plea to the world of science to change its role from pursuing idle and sterile speculations to concentrating all its efforts and resources into saving and regenerating what is left, to pass it on to our children and their children. This man knows butterflies. This man has studied butterflies. He knows that they are the fingerprint of God. And what is his concern? He's saying Don't concentrate on evolution. Start working on doing science and save these beauties, save these wonderful butterflies for our children and the generations to come. And when you look at these butterflies, you say, look at how beautiful they are. Look at the colors. And so many, every continent has something so beautiful of like the butterflies and also the moths. Look at the beauty there. How does evolution explain beauty? They can't. Where does beauty come from? The one who is the beauty maker, God himself. Yes, when you look at these things, you cannot help but stare at them and wonder about them. They declare God's glory. This one is called the dog-faced butterfly. Look at it when it's opened up. With the open wings, does it look like a dog face up there on the top part of the wings? I think it it's a silhouette. I think it kind of looks like a duck. What do you think? But this one is called a dog-faced butterfly. We have that in our area. And here we see, here's God's fingerprints declaring, I'm the creator of beauty. That's right. Many, O Lord our God, are the wonders that you have done. You see, for by him all things were created. All things were created by him and for him. God has purposely made it impossible to explain creation without him. We see in Romans 1:20, for the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that we are without excuse. The more we study God's creation, the more we see evolution is not true. God is the creator, designer. Thank you for listening. If you want to know about butterfly identification, I love this website, butterflyidentification.org. It actually goes state by state, so it helps you figure out what you're looking at. Just love it. So it's butterflyidentification.org. That's my recommendation if you want to look at those things.
In one of his books, Jerry Bergman, in the appendix of the book dealing with the argument of bad design, he made a mention of balance of power. And he says when God knew that sin was coming, he allowed animals to have defenses. Now, in the Garden of Eden, butterflies would not have to worry about getting eaten by birds. But this balance of power, the bat's radar being deflected by the Luna moth's tail, was something that was anticipating the need for protection.
It just shows how God is outside of time and he knows what will be coming. So he sets it in motion.
Any questions? Well, thank you very much, Julie.
I'm sorry, can I just ask one quick question? I couldn't unmute in time, Ross.
Oh, sure.
My question is, do butterflies and moths and the various types of butterflies and moths interbreed? Do we come up with new forms of?
Nope. Nope. They haven't done any of the experiments in that way. Not that I'm even aware of. I don't even hear that experimentation. But moths are moths and butterflies are butterflies, if what I've read. And skippers are skippers.
Thank you.
Are the various are there variations like swallowtail variations? Are they related?
Yes, they can be. Mm-hmm. Yes.
So
just like you have cats or dogs.
So there might be hybrid.
Might be hybrid. Yep.
Black and yellow swallowtails. Okay.
Good question, Neil.
Thanks for your answer.
Yeah, it's like when you start realizing that, llamas and camels, how you can breed them, and who would ever thought that you could get the little babies being a combination of both. You know, one from South America, the other were the camels from the Middle East, you know. They make camas, camels and llamas, camas.
Yeah, so this falls into baraminology, which is finding those created kinds. When God said, let, you know, multiply after your kind, he didn't need to form 100 species of finch, but he could have done that with the original pair of finches.